Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show from the STMM Digital Studio, and I really enjoyed catching up with Kenny Vest. The music scene of coastal Mississippi, Kenny and Kyle and those guys are so connected, and CPR, the way it's sort of integrated into generations, just a great story. And I'm really thrilled to be a part of SuperTalk Mississippi Media, I can assure you that. So now let's shift gears and move over to my friend Paige Roberts, who's the president and CEO of the Jackson County Chamber, and she's been deeply, deeply engaged in the Moss Point recovery effort, where we've recently gotten some good news from the federal government. But without any further ado, let me just say good morning, or good afternoon, or good morning. Really, good morning. Yeah. Paige, how are you doing?
Good day, Ricky.
Good day. Good day. So we'll cover two things. We'll find out the latest in Moss Point. I know you're actually there as we speak, and then we'll also talk about the latest at the chamber. But we did get some good news. That sometimes good news takes a while to get communicated, and the bureaucratic process is slow. But why don't you kind of give us an update?
Sure. Well, we found out Saturday afternoon, which was almost 8 weeks after the tornado, we received our FEMA declaration, which allows us to have both public assistance and individual assistance. And I really want to give a shout out to MEMA, our emergency management team for the state, as well as Governor Reeves, for not giving up when it looked like we would not be qualifying for FEMA assistance originally, and getting a little creative, and with help from the National Weather Service, we were able to do it. And of course, a big thank you to FEMA and the federal government for seeing it our way.
Well,
so that's helpful.
Your way is important because, as we both have discussed in past shows, that the way the FEMA program works, the disaster declarations, the way it works is that it leans toward more heavily populated areas. So small towns like in the Delta or here at Moss Point, on a single event, it's really hard for a small town to get the declarations that they need to be able to assist their citizens. And what you're talking about with the National Weather Service is the ability to say all of these were part of the same weather system, even though you might have had a tornado here and a tornado there and thunderstorms there. It's a big win, really.
Oh, it is. It is a big win. However, we always want to make sure the expectation is set appropriately, that this will not restore the impacted families completely. This is just meant to assist, and it is not a panacea. FEMA is not a panacea. It will not fix everything. And that is why we continue to have the long-term recovery committee, because that is what will be able to leverage these resources for the restoration, a more full restoration for these families.
So why don't you give us an update? How's the city doing, and how are the affected families doing?
Well, I've just had a meeting today with some Amish and Mennonite representatives from northern Indiana, actually where I grew up, so I'm especially excited to see them. But I was explaining to them, this is a city with a strong spirit and a lot of grit. And so I would say these people are making it, but it's hard. I mean, some of them have carved out corners of the house where they think they can still live, waiting for repairs or what have you, perhaps even a rebuild. And then there are those who are still couch surfing at the homes of friends and family, and the ones that have been able to find other places for the long-term future. So it's a variety. We're strong, but there's still a lot to be done, and it takes a lot to be able to help an uninsured person whose home was destroyed find a level of normalcy again.
Yeah, that's gosh, this tough part of we learned so well after Hurricane Katrina. Just some people are going to fall through the cracks. I don't care what kind of programs you develop; they're just going to fall through the cracks. You think about what's going on in Hawaii. I was telling Ann this morning that here's this old community where I can already tell you they're never going to rebuild it to what it was. And highest and best use is going to start to set in. Some rich folks are going to come in. And it's just never going to be the same again. I mean, you know it. Already you already know there's going to be a need for so many people who are going to fall through the cracks. But I don't care where the disaster happens. The conditions in the aftermath are very similar, aren't they?
They are, because, of course, there's a commonality among humanity that is similar. And, what's going on in Maui involves, I feel confident in saying, a lot of trauma. That type of no-notice event, yes, a tornado is a no-notice event, but those wildfires were so fast. And what are they up to? Almost 100 deaths.
Yeah.
When there's death in a community from disaster, it takes on a whole different feel. I have worked those disasters too, and it's just a lot worse when people are also suffering the loss of neighbors.
Yeah, it's hard to watch. How's our favorite mayor doing?
He's well. His birthday was yesterday, and he is 84. As you and I have talked about how incredibly spry he is. My favorite octogenarian for sure. I'm 30 years his junior, and I have to run to keep up with him. He is working on the budget. He's working on downtown revitalization, Highway 63, industrial growth, and the I-10 corridor. There's just a lot going on here.
He is an inspiration, and when I see him in person, I just can't help but smile, because he just makes you feel like you're in a special place when you're in his presence, doesn't he?
Yes, he absolutely does, and it's very helpful when we are courting disaster volunteers, as we are this week, hoping that they'll agree to come down and help.
Our mayor, Billy Knight, the mayor of Moss Point, who has reinvented himself 100 times, could have rode off into the sunset, I don't know, 20 years ago. Here he is giving back to this incredible city. So in the short time we have left, Paige, why don't you give me an update on the chamber? We've got a couple of seconds, and then we'll pick it up on the other side.
Sure. Yeah, we've got our Anchor Awards to celebrate small businesses. U.S. Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith is the keynote speaker Wednesday, the 23rd of this month, so just next week. That's a breakfast at Pelican Landing, actually in Moss Point. And then we continue to have ribbon cuttings and business after hours. I think we continue to thrive even through the challenges of inflation.
Yeah, the challenge is, like, one of those is insurance. I talk a lot about the insurance challenge we have here in coastal Mississippi. We can chat a little bit about that on the other side. And the downtown, the beauty of the downtown revitalization and the beehive of activity that's happening downtown. I mean, it's still super exciting to sort of get your head around that, isn't it?
Oh, very much so. I love the downtown revitalization efforts because they're so organic. It's local people really rallying around their own communities and then bringing the excitement in from fellow developers all up and down I-10.
We actually were there a few weeks ago for a soccer tournament. One of my grandson was playing a soccer tournament. Actually, a baseball tournament. It's not a soccer; it's baseball.
Okay.
And so when it was over, I said, "Ann, let's take a quick," because there was a train. I said, "I'm going to show you something." So we went on and rode through downtown, and for people tend to think of of Pascagoula being sort of like where the baseball was going down. They don't realize that over there by the river is this cool downtown area with mixed-use development that's taking place, and she was blown away with what was going on in downtown. People you typically are, aren't they?
Oh, yes, especially people who haven't been there in a while. I mean, it's really gone from almost tumbleweeds to all kinds of pedestrian and car traffic down there.
Hey, so what we'll do when we get on the other side, we'll talk a little bit more for people who haven't listened to us before. We're talking a little bit more about what really is going on in downtown and why is that happening, the historic district and all the things that are happening, the wonderful investors of all stripes that have come in there and spending millions of dollars on downtown. Hey, when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with the Jackson County Chamber's Paige Roberts. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show from the STMM Digital Studio, the digital marketing arm of SuperTalk Mississippi Media. Thrilled to have them as a sponsor. I have my friend Paige Roberts with the Jackson County Chamber, who's been really knee-deep, actually neck deep in the recovery effort over in Moss Point since they were so unfortunate to have that tornado coming through. And in fact, she's literally in her car in Moss Point as we speak, and had a really good visit as it relates to that effort and the way the community's coming together to do the best they can to fill the gaps for the people who were impacted by the tornado. When we went to break, though, we're talking about the resurgence of downtown Pascagoula, a town that you would not have really, when you think about Ocean Springs or Bay St. Louis and what's going on in downtown Gulfport these days in Bay St. Louis, Pascagoula was not part of that conversation for too long. As Paige pointed out, people might have thought of it as a place where there might be tumbleweeds. That is not Pascagoula anymore. In fact, with Ingalls and Chevron and all the corresponding industry that supports them and part of this economic engine, this wonderful economic bookend of coastal Mississippi, it only makes sense, actually, that Pascagoula would see a resurgence with mixed use and people wanting to live closer to work and restaurants emerging and investors come in the city and the establishment of historic district and the funds that come as a result of that. It's been awesome to watch from where you're sitting, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's so exciting as we do each new ribbon cutting down there, and we hear of new people moving into the residences that are now being leased. It is just so very exciting.
Again, one of the things that make a downtown thrive is when people live there.
Yeah.
So what had happened, there were a lot of professional, lawyers' offices and things like that. But now that you're creating this sort of walkable community with shops and restaurants and, of course, the proximity to the water there, the river, it brings life, doesn't it?
Oh, yes. A lot of people think it's a chicken and egg situation where you have the residents versus the things to do. But the reality is the residents do need to come first, and then you can support it with the other activities. And it doesn't have to be a long time between those two things at all, but you definitely need to do them close to each other. And that's what Pascagoula has done. They have these developers who have restored these historic buildings and provided really great, interesting places to live. And then the other shops and restaurants and bars are coming in and filling in the space around them.
We're lucky in Jackson County because we got a board of supervisors. We've got an administration over at the city of Pascagoula. We talked about Moss Point. We've got a great mayor in Pascagoula that, once again, a guy who's reinvented himself and really is excited about all this change. We've got a good mayor over in Ocean Springs, same kind of thing. But it's great when you can have public-private partnerships working together to help the resurgence of a place like Pascagoula, isn't it?
Oh, yes. And I think that's really the way the Magnolia State's trying to go. If you listen to the legislators, we have this Gulf Coast Restoration Fund, as well as the Restore funding, and even some other buckets of funding from the state level that have helped really push that idea of public-private partnership. It's like the African proverb that says it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a village to revitalize the downtown village.
Yeah.
That's a village of funders, and that is also, I think, a show of real investment, people putting their money where their mouth is, but also where their heart is. And that is how you create these wonderful communities.
Paige, I think we've made good progress actually on the Gulf Coast Restoration Fund. I was pretty critical, go back 3 years ago, too much building of municipal buildings and these kinds of things that should have been using other sources of funds to do, and not enough focus on transformation. And in conversations I have with coastal legislators these days, they say transformational in their dialect today more than I've ever heard them do it. And you go look at what's being funded, there's still a little bit of political football in there, a little bit of turf war, but I do see us making progress in that regard, don't you?
Oh, yes, and I believe the process is a little bit flawed in some places. Overall, it is good. It allows a vetting group, the advisory committee, to make some recommendations, but it ultimately leaves the decisions up to the lawmakers, and they answer, of course, back to the voters. And to their fellow lawmakers, quite frankly.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I'm pleased that Jamie Miller is going to have a leadership role in that now.
Yes.
And we're all moving in the right direction. Man, that tide's going to raise all of our boats, and the opportunity to pay back for many years to come if we do public-private partnerships is going to be very significant. Paige, it's been a pleasure to catch up with my friend.
Yes, you too, Ricky, as always.
You bet. This has been Paige Roberts from the Jackson County Chamber. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.